I was 47 years old when my wife of 19 years told me she was in love with my brother. Not some stranger. Not a coworker I'd never met. My brother Brendan, 44, project manager at a civil engineering firm in Mississauga, the guy I used to drive to hockey practice when we were teenagers because our dad worked nights and couldn't make it. The same guy who stood beside me at our wedding at a little vineyard outside Niagara-on-the-Lake and cried. Actually cried. During my vows. I remember exactly where I was standing when she told me. In the kitchen of the house we'd owned for 11 years on Kerr Street in Oakville. I was making coffee. It was a Tuesday in early March, the kind of gray, half-frozen morning that makes you feel like winter will never actually end. She came downstairs already dressed, which was unusual. Nadine normally worked from home and didn't bother with real clothes until noon. She sat down at the island and folded her hands on the counter, and something about the way she did it, so deliberate, like she'd rehearsed the posture, made my stomach drop before she said a word. She didn't cry. That was the thing I kept coming back to in the weeks after. She delivered it clearly and without flinching, like she'd finally decided to stop carrying something heavy and was setting it down, relieved. I've been seeing Brendan for almost 2 years, she said. I'm sorry, Alan, I didn't plan it, but I'm not going to keep lying to you. I didn't say anything. The coffee maker was making that gurgling sound it makes when the cycle finishes, and for some reason that's what I focused on. The coffee maker. The little orange light blinking on. Nadine Kowalski, 45 years old, interior designer, ran her own small firm out of a home office, had a gift for making spaces feel lived in and warm. We'd met at a mutual friend's housewarming party in Hamilton in 2004. She laughed at something I said within the first 5 minutes, and I thought I want to make this woman laugh for the rest of my life. I thought I had been doing that. I'm not going to tell you I saw warning signs I ignored. I've had people say that to me. You must have known something was off, and I understand why people say it, because it's more comfortable to believe that these things announce themselves first. They don't always. Or maybe they do and you just trust the people you love too much to read the signs correctly. I worked long hours as a structural engineer. I traveled for projects sometimes. I assumed the distance I felt from Nadine over those last couple of years was fatigue, routine, the natural settling that happens in a long marriage. I was wrong about what it was. She moved out 3 weeks later. She went to stay with a friend initially. I'll give her that. She didn't immediately move in with Brendan. But by June they were living together in a condo in Burlington. 20 minutes from the house, where I was still sleeping on my side of the bed out of pure habit. I didn't tell our kids right away. We have 2. Fiona, who was 24 at the time and working as a registered nurse at Hamilton General, and my son Will, who was 21, and finishing his 2nd year of a business degree at Ryerson, Metropolitan now. But I still call it Ryerson out of stubbornness. They knew their parents were separating. They didn't know why. Not the whole truth. Not yet. I told them we'd grown apart. I protected Nadine in that version of the story. I don't know why exactly. Habit maybe. Or some remaining instinct to keep the family from fracturing worse than it already had. Brendan called me once, about a month after Nadine left. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was almost 4 minutes long, and I know this because I could see the timestamp even though I never played it. I deleted it. I haven't spoken to him since. That first summer was the kind of quiet that sits on your chest. I went to work. I came home. I ate whatever was easiest and watched television I couldn't remember the next morning. My neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Kathleen who had known us for 8 years, started leaving food on my porch. Casseroles wrapped in foil, with handwritten reheating instructions on sticky notes, and I found that more gutting than almost anything else about that period. The casseroles meant people could see what I looked like from the outside. Fiona drove down from Hamilton on a Sunday in late August with her partner, a quiet and decent man named Chris, and they cleaned my house without asking permission and then sat with me at the kitchen table for 3 hours. She didn't push me to talk. She just stayed. Will came the following weekend. He arrived unannounced on a Saturday morning with 2 coffees from the Tim Hortons on the corner and a yellow legal pad, and he sat down across from me like he had a meeting scheduled. He was 21, my son, wearing a hoodie from his university and running shoes that were falling apart at the sole, and he looked at me with a steadiness I did not expect. "Dad," he said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" He uncapped a pen and put it on the legal pad. "I want to know if you've ever thought about starting something. A business. Your own firm." I stared at him. "Will, I'm serious. You've been in structural engineering for 22 years. You know every general contractor in the GTA, you know the process from the ground up. Why are you still working for someone else? Because starting a firm costs money, I said. And I'm going through a divorce. This is not the moment. He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer and had prepared for it. I've been doing some reading, he said, and he turned the legal pad around so I could see it. He'd filled 2 pages with notes, revenue projections, startup cost estimates, notes about federal small business grants through the Canada Small Business Financing Program, references to the Ontario Structured Engineering Act. It wasn't polished. It was messy, written fast, crossed out and rewritten. But it was real. He'd actually sat somewhere and thought this through. You did this yourself? I asked. I had a week, he said, like that explained it. I looked at my son, his worn-out shoes, his serious face, the pen in his hand, and something in my chest shifted. Not excitement? Not yet. It was more like the sensation you get when you've been holding your breath for a very long time and you finally remember you're allowed to exhale. What about your degree? I said. I'm not dropping out. I'm saying we plan this for after I graduate. 18 months. That gives you time to save, plan, do it right. I just don't want you to decide it's not possible before you even try. Fiona had been listening from the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. She came to the table and sat down. I've been saving for 3 years, she said. I can put in $20,000 to start. I don't want equity or anything, I just want to help. I looked at her. Fiona, that's your money. I know whose money it is. She said it without blinking, and there was something in her voice, not anger, just certainty, that made it impossible to argue with. She'd always been like that. Even as a kid. She decided things quietly, and then they were decided. I told them I'd think about it. I did think about it, for about 6 months, during which time I also spent $8,000 on a very good divorce lawyer, and learned more about Ontario family property law than I ever wanted to know. The matrimonial home sold in the spring. We split the equity. The financial piece of ending a 19-year marriage is a strange kind of surgery, careful and methodical and completely without mercy. By the following spring, Will was graduating. He'd finished his business degree and had a job offer from a mid-sized accounting firm in Toronto, which he deferred by 6 months, telling his future employer he had a family commitment. He did not tell them the family commitment was helping his father start a company. We incorporated KW Structural Consulting, Inc. in June. K for Kowalski, W for Will's idea, because he said it needed both of us in it. We registered with the Professional Engineers Ontario Registry. We opened a business account at RBC, which required 3 separate trips and a level of paperwork that I found genuinely punishing. We leased a small office above a print shop in downtown Burlington, 600 square feet, 1 boardroom table, 4 chairs that didn't match, a whiteboard Will bought from a garage sale for $40. Fiona painted the walls on a weekend, a clean white that made the space feel twice as large. She brought coffee cake and a level and was there until 9 at night fixing a curtain rod. And when we finally locked up and stood on the sidewalk looking at the frosted glass with our name on it, none of us said anything for a moment. It's real now, Fiona said. It was always real, Will said. I didn't say anything. I just stood there reading our name on the glass until my eyes got blurry, and I decided to blame that on the cold. I'm not going to pretend the first year was easy, because the first year was genuinely hard. I was pulling from my personal savings to cover payroll, which, for a long time, was just Will's salary, because I didn't draw one. I took on contracts that were too small, because small was what I could get. A residential foundation assessment in Ancaster, a load-bearing wall calculation for a renovation in Stony Creek, work I'd have sent a junior engineer to do in my previous life. I drove to those jobs myself in my 8-year-old Civic with a field notebook and a thermos of coffee, and I did the work carefully, and I did not complain about the size of it. What I had was relationships. 22 years of showing up reliably in this industry means people know your name, and more importantly, they know what your name means. I called in every professional goodwill I had accumulated. I asked for referrals honestly, told people I'd started my own shop and was building a client base, and left them with a card. Some of those calls felt humbling in a way I hadn't expected. Some of them led nowhere, but a few of them became the contracts that kept us alive through that first winter. Will was relentless. He handled everything I was bad at. The invoicing, the CRM, the follow-up calls I kept avoiding, the social media presence he insisted on building on LinkedIn that I thought was unnecessary and that turned out to be responsible for 2 significant contracts in our second year. He worked long hours for a salary I knew was below what the accounting firm would have paid him, and he never once mentioned it. Not once. Fiona sent meals. She called every Sunday. She drove down on a Friday evening after a 12-hour shift to sit across from me in our small office and ask questions about the business that she had no professional reason to understand, but had clearly been reading about during her breaks. She bought us a proper espresso machine for the office at Christmas, which felt extravagant and which we used approximately 4 times a day. By our second year, we had 2 junior engineers on contract and a small but stable roster of commercial clients. A property developer in Hamilton, a school board in Halton Region, a commercial renovation company out of Brampton that found us through LinkedIn, which I will now never tell Will I doubted. We moved to a larger office. We bought chairs that matched. The whiteboard from the garage sale is still there, on the same wall, because Will refused to get rid of it. I was in the office on a Friday afternoon in the autumn of our 3rd year when I received an email. I almost skimmed past it because the name in the sender field registered slowly at first, the way your brain sometimes buffers on something it isn't prepared for. It was from Brendan. He hadn't tried to contact me in over 2 years. The email was long, several paragraphs, and the tone was careful in the way that told me he'd written and rewritten it. He said he and Nadine had separated. He said things hadn't worked the way either of them had hoped. He said he was sorry. The word appeared 4 times, which I noticed without meaning to. And then, near the bottom, he said he'd heard I'd started a firm and that he was currently between contracts and wondered if there might be any room for a conversation about working together. I sat with that email for a while. I want to be honest about what I felt because I think people expect a specific kind of answer to this and the truth is more complicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, mostly. Tired and a little sad, not for myself but for what the email represented. The fact that 2 people had blown up 3 lives and it hadn't even held together. I thought about the 4-minute voicemail I'd deleted. I thought about the wedding. I thought about the kid I'd driven to hockey practice in the dark in our dad's borrowed car at 6:30 in the morning. I forwarded the email to Will and wrote 2 words. Your thoughts? He called me, he said without preamble. I know, Dad. I mean it. Not right now, not in this company, not in any form that requires us to trust him with something. I know, Will. Okay, he said. Good. I wrote Brendan back that same evening. I kept it brief. I said I wished him well and I was sorry to hear things hadn't worked out. I told him we weren't in a position to bring on new contractors at this time. I didn't explain further. I didn't have to. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet office for a few minutes, looking at the garage sale whiteboard covered in notes about a commercial project in Guelph, and I thought about something Will had said to me in that first meeting at my kitchen table, when I'd listed all the reasons it was the wrong time. He'd looked at me and said, very simply, the timing's never going to be perfect, Dad. We just have to decide. We decided. KW Structural Consulting just completed its 4th year. We have 7 full-time employees, a client list that includes municipal contracts in 2 Ontario regions, and a reputation in the commercial construction space that I am genuinely proud of. We're not millionaires. I want to be honest about that because I think honesty is what makes a story worth something. But we built something real and we built it together. And last quarter we had our strongest revenue month since we opened. Will is still with the company. He turned down a second job offer last spring. This one from a larger firm in Toronto that would have paid him considerably more. And when I asked him why, he said, because I want to see where this goes. He's 25 now, and sometimes I look across the office at him on a call with a client, and I can't quite line up the person I see with the kid in the falling apart running shoes who showed up at my door with a yellow legal pad and a plan. Fiona got her $20,000 back, with interest, on the day we hit our first significant profit milestone. I handed her a check at dinner, and she looked at it and said, Dad, I told you I didn't want this back, and I said, I know, and I'm your father, so take the check. She laughed and put it in her purse and didn't argue further. I still live in Burlington. I bought a smaller place after the house sold, a townhouse near the lake that I have slowly made into something that feels like mine. I cook more than I used to. I've gotten into trail running, which I started purely because Will dared me to try it, and I am apparently still susceptible to that even at 47, nearly 49 now. I run a half-marathon loop near the Bronte Creek trails on Saturday mornings, and on the drive home I stop at a bakery on Brant Street and drink a coffee by myself and watch the people on the sidewalk, and I find that I am, in those moments, completely okay. I don't think about Nadine the way I used to. The anger took a long time to leave, longer than I expected, longer than I wanted to admit to anyone. But it did leave. What I think now, when I think about it at all, is something close to what a friend of mine told me once. That some people exit your life at exactly the moment required for you to become whoever you were supposed to be next. I'm not sure I fully believe that, but I understand why people find it useful. What I do know is this. I was standing in a kitchen on a gray March morning watching my life come apart, and within a year I was sitting in a 600-square-foot office above a print shop with my 2 kids, building something none of us had built before. They didn't let me disappear into the grief. They showed up with coffee and legal pads and $20,000 and paint rollers and $40 whiteboards, and they pulled me forward, week by week, until forward felt natural again. I didn't expect to start over at 47. I didn't expect my kids to be the ones who showed me how. But here we are.